Help keep Kinks and Beats Daily ad-free and receive bonus content early with a contribution of 20 cents per episode. Visit herohabit.com/shop for more information. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Kinks and Beats Daily. I'm your host, Tony Fry. This is episode 164. And today we are talking about a Kinks song from Preservation Act 2, which is arguably one of their least popular albums, especially at the time. But I think it's gained an audience of appreciation in the years since, once you take it out of the 70s and just look at it as a piece of work as a whole. I think it's more favorably viewed today than it's ever been before. Before we do that, though, I want to encourage everyone, swing by facebook.com/groups/kinksandbeats and join our Facebook group and get some discussions going there. And to let you all know that there are going to be bonus episodes coming out that are going to be exclusively for the folks that are contributing to the podcast. And I know we've been having a hard time staying daily, as our name would imply lately, but things are back to normal, so we're going to be back on that schedule. But to thank people who have been contributing and keeping this podcast ad-free and just available. You know, it's not free to produce these things. We'll be doing exclusive episodes that the rest of you guys aren't going to get until every song is covered. So we're going to have years before you guys will get these bonus episodes. So if that's something that you're interested in helping us out or in getting these monthly bonuses, swing by herohabit.com for that. Okay. Today we're talking about He's Evil by the Kinks, released May 8th, 1974 on Preservation Act 2. And it was released as the B-side to Mirror of Love on July 26, 1974, so a couple months later. The single did not chart in America or the UK. It did nothing. And for the single, it's actually the second time Mirror of Love is going to be released in 1974 as an A-side. The first one was kind of a demo version that had Ray on guitar and piano and drums, I think, and then Dave on mandolin, and then some of the horn players and background singers. And it was intended to be more of a demo. They ended up releasing it as an A-side. It's actually a really cool recording that may be a little bit better than the release version, to be totally honest. But that single did nothing. So then fast forward to July, they released the version that's on the album that we all know now, with He's Evil as the B-side. But they do no promotion for the single, and record reviewers totally ignore it. So there's really no chance on earth that this single would chart. But considering the style that Mirror of Love and He's Evil are, and considering the landscape of 1974 record charts, I don't think any amount of promotion would have charted this single. So for a lot of people, unless you own this album, and I wager there's even a lot of Kinks fans that have skipped this one, this is a pretty rare track, and it's a pretty cool track. It's the third track on the second of four sides. This is a double disc album, and this is the third track on side 2 of 4. And it's a pretty cool rocker, but it still maintains this theatrical vibe that Ray is producing into this project. And a lot of that vibe comes from having the horn section and the female backing singers and all that kind of stuff. But it's also in the arrangements, and we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the harmonic structure. But the arrangements are also leaning more theatrical, and I would say a little bit ahead of their time. Because at this point in the theater scene, we've had a couple rock musicals, Grease, Hair, Bye Bye Birdie, I guess, if you could call that a rock musical, even though that's still more of a traditional musical, even though it's about a rock star. But we haven't had a lot of rock musicals in the mainstream. And he's kind of writing the template for what a lot of musicals will do in the future. And so I think even if these weren't hugely commercially popular albums, I think they did have some sort of influence on the generation of composers that were going to write for the stage in this particular style, because it's not a style that we've heard prior to this, to have a Dixieland band with, hard rock electric guitars, um, and almost, music hall female background singers. It's a very weird combination that is distinctly Ray Davies, but will come into more acceptance further down the line. The song structure and rhythm track almost have a Supertramp sound, and I think that's probably the electric piano that drives it, that's giving me that feel. But even some of the twists and turns that the structure takes, and then the build up at the end, it kind of gives me a Supertramp feel, especially when they were more progressive rock and less Breakfast in America era. I wish they'd done it without the female backing vocals, though. Dave is doing some great harmonies in the background. Maybe some of his best background vocals are on this track, actually. He's doing the almost like a Beach Boys background vocal that gets lost. And then you've got the harmony of the women coming in. And at least the way they're arranged, it makes the recording a little corny, because they're not singing in the rock style. Ray's singing in the rock style. Dave is doing this very traditional rock backing vocal counter melody. And then you've got the women coming in, and it's very vaudevillian. And I think it takes it a little over the edge. Like, we have enough vaudeville by having a tuba on this recording. We don't need to add these this style of female backing vocals. I would have rather heard it be a more rock vocal. And then we get to the refrain, and the refrain's a cool build. It all drops down back to, the original electric piano opening, and builds and builds and builds on top of just this repeated refrain. I love that part. Almost has a jam band feel without dragging on for 19 minutes. And Dave's lead guitar on this, very cool lead guitar. Love his tone. You can say what you want about Dave. I think he's a great guitar player, a good songwriter and all that. But I think where he's underrated in some respects is his tone. This dude is a chameleon, and you listen to 30 years worth of Kinks records, and you can hear how often he changes his guitar tone, and it always fits with the times. He seems like he's always been aware of what the other guitar players were doing, and it fits the style that Ray is adopting for whatever album and all that kind of stuff. But he uses all these different guitar tones over the Kinks catalog, and they're all great, even though they're distinctly different. And to his detriment, I think sometimes it makes his lead lines less identifiable. We all know when Clapton's playing a guitar solo, because he's had basically the same guitar tone for 50 years. But with Dave, because he's changing all the time, like, when he's playing the riff rock, it's Dave Davies. But when he's just shredding, there's nothing really to stick to, because he's always changing it. I personally like that, but I think it's partially why he is underrated as a guitar player, because he's not always so familiar. Anyway, that was a tangent, maybe for a bonus episode. But I love his tone on this part, both in the rhythm and the lead. It's good stuff. So harmonically, we'll get to this part. Harmonically, the song is pretty standard Ray Davies. Chord progression's fairly simple, uses basic chords, but then he slips in a couple little oddities that create some good hooks. And that's what Ray does best. He sticks to majors and minors. He'll throw in the occasional seventh, but he doesn't deviate from that very often. That said, some of his use of these basic chords is unparalleled. Like, he writes beautiful chord changes and beautiful melodies on top of them. I'm not using this as a criticism. It's just how it is. The main riff of the verse, we're going to say the song's in C, because for the most part it is. The main riff, he's just going a C chord to G chord to B flat to F. Now, the B flat isn't a part of C major scale, but essentially that he's kind of borrowing that chord. Classical music theory analysis doesn't really apply to this particular thing. because basically what he's doing is he's just working down in fourths. So he hits the C chord, he goes down a fourth to G. Then he hits a B flat, he goes down a fourth to F. And if you're playing power chords, he's just going from the third fret to the third fret to the first fret to the first fret. The C's on the third fret of the fifth string, G's on the third of the sixth. B flat's the first fret of the fifth string. So he could have done that all day. Right? He could have done that all the time. So that's not really a total deviation from the scale. And B flat is, if we're playing a rock song, the flat 7. So I mean, it's not too far off. So that's all he's doing there. Nothing big. He's done stuff like that before. It's not crazy. Then when he gets to the "He'll Treat You Rough" portion, he shifts to the 4 chord, then a 6, then back to 4, but with a flat 7th on top, and then to 2. All right. So to explain that, he goes an F chord, which is your 4, then an A minor, which is your 6, then an F7, which is still technically a 4, but we're borrowing that. It's really what would that be? That would be nothing really. It's not really. It's the totally borrowed chord. It would be the 5 of the flat 7. I mean, it's not really a thing. So we're basically borrowing that E flat, and then a D minor, which is the 2. And what that does is we've got a kind of a descending chromatic line. So from F to E, we're on F, and then the E, because that's the 5th of A minor, then the E flat, because that's the 7th in the F7 chord, then to D, because that's the root of the D minor chord. So you're just doing, but he's got all these other chords built around that. Whoops. And that D minor is kind of a cool trick. I don't think most people would have gone to D minor there to get to that D. So that's a cool little hook. But still, nothing crazy. He's done this kind of stuff before. It's nothing out of the ordinary for Ray. But then we get to, and once you're in there, and once you're in, there'll be no getting out, and then the lookout section. And this is where we see an unusual Ray chord with an F augmented. And what this means is that he's taking the 5th of the F chord, which in this case is a C, and raising it a half step to C sharp. So instead of playing an F chord, he's playing an F augmented. And this is a very George Harrison guitar chord. So now instead of the chord being FAC, it's FAC sharp. And then from there, he goes to a D minor chord. And that chord is DFA. Okay, so we go, so there's only one note difference between the F augmented and the D minor. So he's basically using this F augmented chord to slide in to a D minor chord. So that's kind of cool. That F augmented, that's a little bit less common for Ray to use, except when he's trying to be theatrical. He's really expanding his chord palette with some of these tunes on the rock opera concept album, theatrical kind of stuff. That's about it. You know, it's basically, there's 3 different kinds of sections to this song, and then he just repeats them and mixes them up and strips them down and builds them back up. And there's, you know, it's like a lot of the songs on this album. We talked about it when we talked about Shepherds of the Nation. With a lot of the songs on this album, it's more about the arrangement than the actual foundation of the song. And that's where Ray's genius is really coming through on this album, is these arrangements that I think are overlooked, because in a lot of sense, the lyrical content of this album gets in the way of some really strong musical content. overall, this is a highlight of Act 2 for me. And in fact, this side 2, might be my favorite side because it also contains Scum of the Earth, Secondhand Car Spiv, and Mirror of Love, which, despite them all being pretty weird tunes, are among my favorites of this album. Eventually, we'll do a full episode on this album, and a lot like our chat about Act 1, I'm not going to bag on it nearly as much as some critics, although I do think the album should have been condensed down a lot, and it can be a difficult listen at times, but there's still enough quality music on here for a fan of music. Okay, if you're only a fan of the hard rock and Kinks, I get why you may not like this. This is a very specific era in their catalog that can be tough to digest sometimes. But overall, I think it's a worthy listen. And there are times, I've made a lot of my living as a musician working in theater. And so I have a soft spot for some of these theatrical things. I also want to pose a question to y'all. Give me a call, 925-494-1739. I'm asking this question. This was suggested to me. What is one song in the Kinks or Beatles or solo catalogs that over the years you've changed your opinion on? So maybe it's a song when you were in high school that you hated. Now that you're an adult, you're like, well, this is actually a fantastic song. Or vice versa. A song that you loved that now you're looking at it like, this is total garbage. Give me one of each if you want. Give me one from each band. I don't care. I want to know, though, what is a song from any of these catalogs, Beatles, Kinks, solo, Beatles, solo, Kinks, that you have changed your opinion on as you've gotten older? Positively, negatively, either way. And I don't want to hear songs you're sick of, right? Like, you'll get a lot of people that are like, yeah, Yesterday's a great song, but it's so overplayed. I've heard it a billion times. I'm tired of it. That doesn't mean you changed your opinion on the song. You're just tired of it. I want to hear something that you have a new appreciation or depreciation for as you've gotten older. So again, give me a call, 925-494-1739, and we'll use these answers as a bonus episode that you will get without being a donor. This will be a bonus episode for everybody. All right. All right. I will talk to you guys next time. Thank you for listening. Make sure you leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes and keep downloading. Have a great day. This podcast is presented by the Hero Habit Podcast Network. Swing by HeroHabit.com today to comment on this episode and poke around our growing database of sports and pop culture news, reviews, and collectibles. HeroHabit.com. Collect your heroes.